Okay, so I've been watching The Last of Us, and you have to keep this in mind. I'm someone who never played the video game, didn't know what the hell it was. It just sounded like a cool show, and I just went into it without knowing anything, right? The show itself has some really cool plot lines, and it was pretty captivating. But the overall, I would say it has some serious issues. Once you go through, and my impression after I watched the video game cutscenes, I went through that. I was kind of curious to see how what changes it was made, right? Because I think there was an episode in season 1 where they go to Kansas City, and I had read somewhere that the choice to have that in Kansas City was different from the video game because the video game had that scene in Pittsburgh, right? So that kind of piqued my interest into getting to know the video game cutscenes a little bit better, right? So there's some really egregious kind of out of nowhere things that happen with The Last of Us, right? I would say within the first few episodes you pick up on it pretty quickly, right? Joel's a great character, and I guess he's kind of a whack job actor or whatever, but he does an excellent. I would say that he's the most captivating actor in the show for sure. Like when he dies off in the second season, the show's not interesting to me anymore, right? Or it loses a lot of interest, right? And it's even funnier because I thought the writers chose to do that. Like I was like, oh, a video game would never do that, right? No, the video game actually killed him off in almost the same manner. I was like, dude, what? So basically, the first season is the first video game, and the second season is the second video game, Last of Us 2. And the first season has a really repulsive moment where you're on the third episode, you're watching these two guys, Bill and Frank, right? Bill seems like I can't remember which one's which. I think Bill's the guy that was the conspiracy guy that had the underground house bunker. And it was really cool, right? Bill seems like he's cool. He's got this, he's gated up his whole city. He's put some traps in. He seems like a really cool guy, right? He has this normal, and both of them seem normal, right? He has this normal guy, Frank. He captures him, right? He takes him in for a meal or whatever because Frank doesn't seem dangerous. He's going from Boston to Baltimore or something like that. And they're both playing the piano. They're kind of getting a little closer, right? Closer in just like a platonic sense, right? As a normal dude, you're not expecting this to happen, but they fucking kissed and it was kind of out of nowhere, right? There was really no like sexual tension or anything like that. And it's like, I'm a dude. I don't want to see that shit. So that was one of the worst parts of the show for sure. I mean, seriously, like even though the show, I would say that the video game has really good plot lines, but the show was good not because the show was good, but because the video game was excellent. Or at least the first one was, right? The writing and everything in the first video game was awesome. They changed some things, but I thought that it was okay. I forgot to mention the second episode. I think there was the cordyceps zombie that kissed Tess to kill her before she killed them all with that grenade. That was the dumbest fucking thing I've ever seen. So once that happened, I was kind of like, oh my god, okay, the writers are definitely on something when they're writing this. So just keep in mind you'll get some really weird wacko shit like that, right? Come on, do we really want to see a fucking zombie kissing a girl? Like, who the fuck wants that, right? I'm trying to do this chronologically because I haven't seen these episodes in a few weeks. But I think in Kansas City there was kind of a big plot line where it's like they forced the zombies underground. It's like force them underground. Like what? Did they like corral them like sheep or something? Like how did they get them all underground, right? It doesn't go into detail. It's just kind of a dumb thing that happens, right? And also one of the biggest plot inconveniences and some of these some of these inconveniences are just super notable, but all the zombies are underground, right? When they finally get out of the underground and they come out on the other side, right? And there's that big fight, right? Because Joel goes into the house and finds the sniper guy. The sniper's somehow part of the team of the girls' rebellion against the QZ from Kansas City. The guy radios them and they're outside the city. It takes them like 30 seconds to get there to where Joel and all of them are from outside the city. That was total fucking bullshit, and it was completely convenient for the plot. That stuck with me for a long time. And once they were gonna die and the truck was gonna get sucked underground and the zombies come pouring out, that was like, what the hell? Like what? That was completely convenient, right? So that was a terrible moment. I think we get to the 6th episode where they make it to Colorado and Joel gets stabbed even though they had plenty of time to see those guys coming, I think. So Joel's like totally under and on his deathbed basically in that house. And somehow he survives it. That was like, oh yeah, fucking right? And then in the final episode, we see that they get to Salt Lake, and Joel makes the decision to kill the Fireflies and save Abby, even though Abby would have saved them, and Abby would have, of course, died. So then we get to one of the next episodes, which is just like super drawn out and just as long and drawn out as the 3rd episode, where the 2 gay guys were there. And granted, the 2 gay guys, like, I didn't want to watch a whole episode of them being romantic and loving each other, even if it was a little touching at moments. But we get to another episode where we see Abby and that girl who's a Firefly sneak out to the mall, and rather than kind of make this a little concise flashback, the whole episode is a flashback, and it involves a character we don't like and give a shit about, and we're forced to sit and watch that as they play arcade games and all this other shit, right? So it's kind of a cute moment, but they could have made that whole 45 or 50 minute episode so that was pretty painful. And another note I forgot to mention in the show was, even though Henry and Sam are really cool characters from Kansas City, I didn't mind the whole sign language thing, but that was not part of the video game, and I can't help but feel it has something to do with like having disabilities or whatever, making it cool. And you know what, Henry and Cameron, I did like them as characters, even if they were signing, right? I have no problem with that. It's just when you watch the video game cutscenes, you kind of see some things that are just like completely fucking different, right? So when it came to the two gay guys, I don't even think they were dating from what I remember in the video game cutscene. I think one of them had already killed themselves, or that one of them had already been bitten. So basically the show likes to make a way where I wouldn't have minded seeing how these guys survived in the third episode. Like, you know, going out there trying to fortify their little city that they had bunkered themselves into, right? The problem is we made it this whole episode and focused on this dumb shit, just like the Riley episode where she was the Firefly, and we watched her and Ellie have a few moments before Riley died. And it's just like we have some really, really long, drawn-out episodes I don't want to have anything to fucking do with, right? So now we're getting to like, now I think in the show we get to Wyoming, which is where Tommy lives. And another problem with the show is like, I guess this was part of the video game, so I can't necessarily fault them for that. But this whole traveling between Boston to Seattle to Jackson, Wyoming, to Atlanta, to this QZ, to that QZ, just like no problem, right? I think even in the show, Tommy had mentioned like, oh yeah, we went to Texas to go get your photo. It was just like, this whole traveling in the apocalypse thing is just not a thing, right? Anyway, when we get to Wyoming, Wyoming's a really, really rural, like when you think of the most rural place you can be in the United States, Wyoming is pretty much about as rural as it's going to get, right? You have like what, 400,000 people, 600,000 people, something like that, and it's basically just going to be like backcountry as you can be, right? There's going to be almost no black people. I mean, it's like I think black people are less than 1% of the population in Wyoming, right? So we get to the thing, right? And the leader of the whole group that meets Joel, there's like 6 or 7 of those guys, is a black woman. It's just like, come the fuck on. Like, let's be at least semi-realistic, right? That's a lot of like what makes a TV show great to me is like, is there like semi-realistic? Is it, how realistic is it? No show's gonna be perfectly realistic, right? If they can keep the Hollywood sidetracking bullshit to like a minimum, and then sometimes the character's inexplicable stuff, it's just gonna happen during the show sometimes, then I will probably think it's a good show, right? But because of this is just like, come on, are we just making shit up here, right? So also in Jackson, Wyoming, right? I'm getting into the season 2 part here very quickly, but they have an Asian guy, which is kind of funny, right? I guess, right? They also have Tommy, who has a son who's like half black, right? Because the black girl is the leader and they're both like a thing, right? It's just like they've tried to put it in your face over and over and over. It's just like, I'm still a normal person. I'm resistant to it. And you know what? For a show, I would say it was good, but it's, once again, the video game is what did all the heavy lifting. The show was not like creative in itself. It did a lot of piggybacking off of it. And so when you watch the video game cutscenes, you'll see that the show is actually a lot worse, and they were lucky to get it as good as they did. Also, one of the worst things in the show is when Tommy decides to not go to Colorado with Joel and Abby. That made no sense to me, right? If you've had a brother you haven't seen in 20 years, right? You guys were really close. You guys were living together before the whole apocalypse. How do you let him go on his own, regardless of what your family is or isn't in the new place? And it's been like that for maybe 5, 10, 15 years. This is your brother, and yeah, things might not be the same, but you're going to let him go to Colorado all by him fucking self? Terrible decision. And once again, when we look at the video game, in the video game, Tommy goes with Joel. That's what I'm talking about. If my brother showed up and expected me to not go with him, that would be fucking dog shit, because I'm going to the grave with him if he's going somewhere in the middle of the apocalypse and I haven't seen him in 15 or 20 years, right? You write him off as dead and you're like, oh my god, you're still alive? Yeah, I'm doing that, right? Sorry, that's called brother ties, right? Like, unless your brother's a total piece of shit, you're probably going to do that with him, I would assume, right? That's what I would have done. So I'm confusing my episodes here. I think the episode I've been referring to is episode 3. So basically, yeah, when we get to Salt Lake, we see that the main problem that I have with this whole Salt Lake plot arc. So once we get to season 2, this is where some serious fucking problems start, right? So The Last of Us 1 was excellent for its writing, and it had decent gameplay from what I understand. I never played it. But you get to The Last of Us 2, and the gameplay is what gets better in The Last of Us 2, basically, is what I read, right? The Last of Us 2 writing, though, is fucking horrible. There are so many unanswered questions and things that they chose to do that are really, really bad. It's definitely reflected in the Season 2 episodes, right, of the show. But killing Joel in Season 2, terrible, terrible decision, right? And the video game was plagued with awful decisions. That was one of them. But it's just, like, so polarizingly bad, right? I mean, the whole show, the reason why I like the show is because the main character, Joel, is so likable, right? It's so easy to relate to, at least in the sense of, like, just watching it, right? As a person who watches the show, right, we don't have video game gameplay, right? So when the show has when the video game has worse writing, and that's all we're able to work with, yeah, the show is going to be a dumpster fire, right? So we already have the dumpster fire people from Season 1 who change things unnecessarily. They give us the gay guy episode. They give us that whole long drawn out episode where Abby and Riley are like, where they go to kiss at the mall, and that's 40 minutes of my life I'll never get back. Season 2 basically just ends up being a total dumpster fire, right? And then there's another problem, right? We have the people who are the Fireflies, and the Firefly doctor has a girl who is part of the Washington force, so now we have Seattle getting on the map, right? And we just have all this fucking hunting and like, yeah, we can go to Jackson, it's no problem. We'll find the people in Jackson. Yeah, that's no problem. And the city of Jackson was an interesting change. I actually kind of liked it because I think in the video game it's kind of like they're at a power dam or a water dam or some sort of electrical looking thing that was run down and they're trying to get it to work again. Oh no, sorry, it was a hydropower thing. And by the way, right, we just finished watching the second season's 6th episode, right? So they're supposed to I like the flashback episode. It was kind of good, right? Joel, flashback, Abby. You know, I'm not a big Abby person. It feels miscast, maybe you could say, because she's so, like, hyper-aggressive. But given that it's the 6th episode of Season 2, and there's only one more episode to come from what I know, they have so many things to wrap up in the 7th episode of Season 2 that if it's not a 2-hour wrap-up episode, it's just going to be a dumpster fire. Like, there was the guy that threw the grenade in the truck in Season 2, right? I think maybe the 4th or 5th episode. And the new guy, he told the new guy to say, hey, come outside and learn something, right? He kills them all. That guy in the video game also had a problem because he gets like written about a little bit and then he has like no conclusion. So I don't know what the writers are going to try to do with that guy, right? There's the new type of zombie that evolved in Seattle, and there's like a ton of them that were in that little cage thing or whatever, right? They conveniently just like get all shot by the Asian guy, right? Who finds them in Seattle. Just like convenience after convenience. Yeah, Season 2 has a lot of problems with that. I think it's interesting that they have the evolved zombie, but this is only the second time that we've seen the second version of like that group of evolved stalker like types, right? Also, the battle for Jackson, that was like really poor because you have all these zombies and they all just invade, right? But they don't lose. Like, the whole city was completely and totally overrun, right? The flamethrower, like, barely beats the bloater at the last second. Like, there's just so many problems with it, right? Abby and the crew hunting down the Jackson guy because they hate him that much after a few years. It just seems so long and drawn out and just, like, trash, you know? If you played the video game before you saw the show, let me know what you were expecting and what you thought of the show, because your take on it would probably be so much worse, because you lose the video gameplay, which was the highlight of the second game, and you see the terrible writing and the deviations they made from the first season, which were already not good, but the second one is like really bad, right? So let me know on a scale of 1 to 10 what you thought it was. And finally, the most glaringly huge obvious that I completely forgot to mention was, okay, so we have all this hate for Abby and her crew. We know they're from the WLF, the Washington Liberation Force. You mean to tell me we hate this group so much that we're going to go from Jackson, Wyoming, where it's kind of hard enough to make it as it is, but it's isolated, and we're going to go all the fucking way to Washington against an entire group, and 2 girls are going to take out all these incompetent men and incompetent people. And I mean, it just seems so far-fetched and ridiculous. It's like not even, and we don't see any traveling to it really, right? Here's what you have to do, right? The video game plot, I would give it like a 7, 8, 9 out of 10. It was very captivating, very interesting, right? I like what they did in the first season, second episode, trying to explain in Jakarta, right, Indonesia, that this is how the whole thing began. Even though it made no sense, it was kind of like a cool scene with the doctor, right? And the military guy. So overall, I would give the video game series with the plots, the first game was awesome with like a 9 or 10, and the second video game, from what I saw, it just looked really like it had a lot of problems and unfinished stuff, so I would give it like a 5 out of 10, maybe a 4. And since I know that the gameplay mechanics were awesome in The Last of Us 2, then I would probably give the story like a 3 then, right? Because with the show, that's all we get, right? So the show, I would say season 1, I would give it like, 6, 7 out of 10. 7's, I would say it's a really, really trash 7 or like a reasonable 6, you know? If you can look past the glaringly huge problems with the show, and if you're like me, you kind of appreciate realism and try not to make it too Hollywoody, then a 6 is like, it's engaging enough, but once you kind of know what you know about the video games, it's kind of like, the writers didn't really do that much. They added a bunch of dumb shit we don't care about, right? The second season, man, the second season's been pretty painful to watch in a lot of respects, right? Because then you have this girl now that's like kissing Abby, and they're both like becoming lesbians, and Abby's gay, but Dina is the one that gets pregnant from the Asian guy. It's just like this whole mess, and it's like, I don't even really care that much, right? So it's just been a really painful watch in a lot of ways. But Joel's been captivating, so the second that Joel gets back on the screen, it's like, oh wow, I actually care again, So I just don't care that much about Abby, I guess, as a character, So the second season was rife with those problems, and, lo and behold, I would give the show, like, what, maybe the first season like a 6, maybe the second season, oh man, it's been pretty painful. I'd say at times it could be like a 5 or 6, but it's really been like a 4, maybe a 4.5. I mean, it's not bad, it's not terrible, it's just, there's a lot of, like, stuff I don't really care about, right? Like, I like the elements of, like, looking at, like, how the other societies live, right? So, like, the WLF, the concept of them being in Washington is, like, kind of cool, right? But it's just, I'm not in love with the way they've, like, done things and the, small choices they've made. It's just been not great overall, right? Too many conveniences and whatever. So, I like the show with a huge asterisk, it's like decent enough, but a lot of the video games like where the highlight really was, right? So they kind of screwed it up in the show. I would say really in season 2 is where it gets really screwed up. because the video game second video game was so bad with its writing, right? First season was pretty reasonable, you know? So overall, I would give the video game series with the plots, the first game was awesome with like a 9 or 10, and the second video game, from what I saw, it just looked really like it had a lot of problems and unfinished stuff, so I would give it like a 5 out of 10, maybe a 4. And since I know that the gameplay mechanics were awesome in The Last of Us 2, then I would probably give the story like a 3 then, right? Because with the show, that's all we get, right? So the show, I would say season 1, I would give it like, 6, 7 out of 10. 7's, I would say it's a really, really trash 7 or like a reasonable 6, you know? If you can look past the glaringly huge problems with the show, and if you're like me, you kind of appreciate realism and try not to make it too Hollywoody, then a 6 is like, it's engaging enough, but once you kind of know what you know about the video games, it's kind of like, the writers didn't really do that much. They added a bunch of dumb shit we don't care about, right? The second season, man, the second season's been pretty painful to watch in a lot of respects. Because then you have this girl now that's like kissing Abby, and they're both like becoming lesbians, and Abby's gay, but Dina's the one that gets pregnant from the Asian guy. It's just like this whole mess, and it's like, I don't even really care that much, right? So it's just been a really painful watch in a lot of ways. But Joel's been captivating, so the second that Joel gets back on the screen, it's like, oh wow, I actually care again, So I just don't care that much about Abby, I guess, as a character, I think the strongest parts of the series that kind of make me rate it that way are that the zombie apocalypse or the zombie universe itself does enough of the work to kind of make it tolerable, or at least like, okay. I mean, for example, when one of the girls goes down into the B2 level where the infection's like in the air, that was a really cool thing to see. It's like the captivation of like the zombies is like really interesting. Seeing some of these characters though over and over, or just be put there because they're like diversity hires, or like, hey, we need an Asian guy, can you like go fill out that role? And the Asian guy is kind of a cool dude, right? But it just feels miscast because it's like, well, it's Wyoming. You're in the middle of buttfuck nowhere. You mean to tell me you travel from another city just to get to Jackson, Wyoming? I mean, it's possible, I guess. And how are these people getting around? Are they using cars? I mean, apparently gas goes bad after like 6 to 12 months because it deteriorates so much into basically just water. So I don't know. I think that the revenge plot is absolutely ridiculous, and given that they have one episode to wrap this whole thing up, it's going to be very disappointing. I'd be surprised if it's a good episode.